Imagine waking up in one of the richest cities in the Roman Empire. The streets filled with wine merchants, children running through crowded markets, fresh bread baking in stone ovens. And by the end of the day, your entire world is buried under volcanic ash. Not ruined, not damaged, buried. Thousands of people vanished in a single night beneath the shadow of one mountain. And the terrifying part? Most people in Pompeii had no idea what a volcano even was, because Mount Vesuvius had slept for centuries, until the day it woke up. This is the story of how I escaped Pompeii during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. And trust me, if you had stood where I stood that day, you would have believed the gods themselves were ending the world. I was born in Pompeii, a beautiful Roman city near the Bay of Naples, in what is now Italy. If you had visited our streets before the eruption, you would have thought life there was perfect. The roads were crowded from sunrise to sunset. Merchants shouted prices over one another. The smell of olive oil, fish sauce, and fresh bread drifted through the air. The wealthy walked around in bright white togas, while slaves carried baskets through the streets. At night, taverns filled with laughter and gambling. Pompeii was alive, and honestly, most of us believed Rome itself would last forever. Every morning I would pass public baths steaming with hot water. Children practiced writing on wax tablets. Artists painted colorful murals across villa walls. People argued about politics. People cheated on spouses. People drank too much wine. In other words, people were just people. But there was one thing everyone ignored: the mountain. Mount Vesuvius stood quietly in the distance overlooking the city. Green, peaceful, almost beautiful. Nobody feared it. Nobody even called it a volcano. To us, it was simply part of the landscape, but looking back now, the warnings had already started. For years, strange earthquakes rattled the city. Small tremors at first, cups shaking on tables, dogs barking at nothing, buildings creaking during the night. 17 years earlier, a massive earthquake had already damaged parts of Pompeii. But Romans were used to earthquakes. We rebuilt, we continued our lives, and eventually, we stopped worrying. That was our mistake. The morning of the eruption started normally. The sky was clear. Vendors opened shops. Fishermen headed toward the harbor. Nothing felt unusual. Then, sometime around midday, the earth shook harder than I had ever felt before. Not a quick tremor, a violent jolt. Buildings groaned. Statues toppled over. People stumbled into the streets screaming. I remember hearing pottery smash everywhere at once. And then, someone pointed toward the mountain. At first, I thought it was a storm cloud. But it wasn't moving like a cloud. A gigantic black column exploded upward from Vesuvius like a tree growing into the sky. Ash, smoke, fire. The top spread outward like a giant umbrella over the city. People froze. Nobody understood what we were seeing. Some fell to their knees praying to Jupiter. Others screamed that the underworld had opened. Within minutes, ash began falling from the sky, soft at first, like gray snow. Children actually laughed when it started. But the laughter didn't last long. The sky darkened rapidly. Birds disappeared. The air smelled strange, sharp, and poisonous. Then rocks started falling. Not pebbles. Chunks times of volcanic stone, large enough to crush rooftops. People ran in every direction. Parents grabbed children, merchants abandoned shops, animals broke loose through the streets. And still, many people stayed inside their homes. That's the terrifying thing about disasters. Most people don't immediately run. They hesitate. They wait for things to calm down. But Vesuvius was only getting started. By evening, Pompeii no longer looked like a city. It looked like the end of the world. Ash covered everything. Roofs collapsed under the weight. The streets disappeared beneath layers of debris. And then came the darkness. Not nighttime darkness. Complete time's darkness. You couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. People carried oil lamps, but even those barely worked through the ash clouds. The air became almost impossible to breathe. Every inhale filled your mouth with grit. People wrapped cloth around their faces, trying not to choke. The screams were everywhere. Some cried for missing children. Others begged the gods for mercy. I remember hearing one woman shouting her husband's name over and over until her voice disappeared into the chaos. The earthquakes kept getting worse. The ground rolled beneath our feet like waves. Walls cracked open. Temples collapsed. And then the sea did something horrifying. The water near the harbor suddenly pulled backward. Ships tilted awkwardly onto wet sand. People stared in confusion. Today we know eruptions and earthquakes can trigger tsunamis. But back then, we had no understanding of what was happening. Minutes later, waves crashed violently back toward shore. Panic spread instantly. At that point, everyone understood one thing: Pompeii was dying. Some tried escaping by road. Others ran toward the sea. Many families became separated in the darkness. I stayed with my younger sister and our neighbor Marcus. We covered our mouths with wet cloth and pushed through the streets while burning debris crashed around us. People were being trampled. Horses screamed in terror. Some citizens carried bags of gold and jewelry. Others carried only their children. And honestly, the rich and poor all looked the same beneath the ash, terrified. The strangest part was the lightning. Volcanic lightning flashed constantly inside the ash cloud above us. The sky looked alive, like the gods were fighting each other overhead. Then came the heat. Not ordinary heat. An unnatural wave of scorching air. People today sometimes compare it to radiation because victims described invisible, deadly heat arriving before they could even see the pyroclastic surge itself. But this wasn't nuclear radiation. It was something equally terrifying for ancient people. Superheated volcanic gas and ash moving faster than a human could run. And once those pyroclastic flows arrived, survival became nearly impossible. Entire groups of people vanished within moments. Some died sheltering in houses. Others suffocated in cellars. Many were buried exactly where they stood. The city that had laughed and traded and celebrated only hours earlier was disappearing forever beneath ash. We kept moving south away from the city. That's probably what saved us. Ash reached our knees in some places. Every few seconds, another tremor knocked people to the ground. The darkness made everything worse. You could hear people nearby, but never see them. At one point, Marcus stopped running. He wanted to go back for his parents. I grabbed his arm and told him if we turned around, we would die too. He cried while we kept moving. That's something history books rarely talk about. Survival sometimes means leaving people behind. Eventually, we reached higher ground outside the city. From there, I looked back at Pompeii, or at least where Pompeii used to be. You could barely see it anymore. The entire city had vanished beneath a black storm cloud. Flashes of fire lit the sky. The mountain roared continuously, like thunder that never stopped. And people were still running out of the darkness even hours later, covered head to toe in ash, some injured, some carrying bodies, some completely silent, from shock. Then sometime before dawn, there was an explosion louder than anything I had ever heard. A massive pyroclastic surge rushed down the mountain. Hot ash and gas swallowed the city completely. Pompeii disappeared. Just like that. Gone. Buried beneath meters of volcanic material. And underneath all of it, thousands of people remained trapped forever. The next morning, the world looked unrecognizable. Ash covered the countryside like snow. Trees were burned black. The sun barely shined through the haze. Survivors wandered silently, searching for family members who would never return. And the worst part? There was nothing left to rescue. Pompeii was sealed beneath volcanic ash. Entire homes, temples, markets, people, frozen in time. For centuries, the city disappeared from history until archaeologists rediscovered it. And when they uncovered the bodies, they found something heartbreaking. Families huddled together, parents shielding children, citizens covering their mouths trying to breathe. The final moments of ordinary people caught in an unimaginable disaster. That's why Pompeii still fascinates the world today. Because it doesn't feel like ancient history. It feels human. You can walk through the ruins today and still see roads, bakeries, paintings, even graffiti written by ordinary citizens nearly 2,000 years ago. Pompeii reminds us how fragile civilization really is. One normal morning, One ordinary day, and everything can change forever. And honestly, if I survived something like that, I don't think I'd ever look at mountains the same way again. Because somewhere beneath the silence of Vesuvius, an entire city is still waiting in the dark,